all of that. Sending him off. And then after about 5 or 6 months, I started getting concerned messages from members of the public who'd written letters and sent them in. Concerned because they'd heard nothing from anyone. And I started making some inquiries of the Immigration Department to find out what was going on. The person who got back to me from Immigration explained that her involvement was primarily in relation to Nauru. And I said, look, people haven't been getting letters back. All of the letters that were sent across were included stamped self-addressed envelopes, self-addressed to the original letter writer. And they had Australian stamps on them to the value of $1.80, because I knew from past experience that Nauru accepts Australian stamps. It took nearly 4 months of correspondence for this woman to say, oh, well, Nauru doesn't accept Australian stamps unless they're bought in Nauru. I'm not sure how you tell. That's what she tells me. So I said, well, look, then in that case, I need to know what's happened to those replies, because there's only 3 things that could happen. One is that the individual letters are returned to the individual asylum seekers who wrote the replies. The second, and might be common sense, would be to bring the letters to Australia and put them in an Australian letterbox, because we do still recognise Australian stamps. The third, I said, would be to either hold or destroy the reply letters, but that would be an interference with the mail, which is a serious criminal offence, both in Australia and in Nauru. So which is it? She then said, oh, someone else is going to look after this query. She referred it to someone else in the department, who, as it happened, was on leave. Eventually, after repeated emails, I managed to get a response from this other person who kept on going, sort of flipping my inquiries aside. And this went on for almost all of last year, until 2 days before Christmas, I received 4 large boxes of letters from the Immigration Department. They were all but 9 of the letters which had been sent to people on Nauru, all marked return to sender. Letters which had been sent progressively from April last year through to December, all returned in one batch in December. If I say it looked like bad faith, I think you might agree. I've just yesterday, heard that something similar seems to be happening on Manus. I heard yesterday, I got a very reliable report from a colleague who has been working on Manus, and they explained that there was one Iranian man, very popular in the camp, very good English, he's often helping the guards because he can interpret and so on, and he's one of those guys that everyone likes. He was in the computer room typing an email when a Transfield guard came in and asked him what he was doing. He said he was typing up an email to a lawyer, happened to be me, as it turns out. He was thereupon arrested. The email was trashed. He was arrested and flexi-cuffed. He complained that the flexi-cuffs were too tight and were hurting his wrists. So they tightened them further. They then took him off and threw him in jail in Lorengau prison. And a week later, he has still got his hands bandaged from the harm that they suffered. And so far as we can tell, he's not been charged with anything. I don't think it's a criminal offence to write to a lawyer, especially when you're being held in detention without having broken any law. That's what's going on, and it's happening in our name, on behalf of our government, and we tolerate it because the government has lied to us, and the Labor Party has not called them out for lying. It's about time that Labor found a bit of spine and started acting the way it should and bringing Australia back to its moral bearings, because with that, and for apologies for the apostrophe, which I was not responsible for, for which there can be no justification, but maybe that's appropriate, it is with great regret that I launched this book.
Now, Julian's very kindly agreed to take some questions, so if there are anyone with questions for Julian, please, let's begin. Do you want
Yeah, maybe don't.
Where to from here?
Oh, God.
Yes, exactly.
If I knew, I would have fixed it up years ago. I had no idea. But I tell you what, it would make a huge difference if the lie about illegals could be contradicted with authority. I can only reach at best 30% of the population because the Murdoch press aren't really interested in what I say. If Bill Shorten, for example, were to say something authoritatively, that would be covered. And right at the moment, given that Abbott's not looking too fancy, it might get some traction. So, see what you can do? I've had a long chat to him, but that didn't make a scrap of difference. And replace Mars with Melissa Clark. Or anyone. Drover's dog, I don't care. Yeah.
The company Transfield, who manages both Madison and the room, is there no way that we can take any action against them for a lot of the atrocities that are happening? And they have offices right here in Sydney.
Look, you probably can, but can I say it's not something that I would urge? They're a company, they're in there to make a profit. They're doing work for the government, which is lawful, although shameful. So I don't think they should be the focus of our hatred and contempt. It's the government and the opposition that deserve our hatred and contempt for what's going on.
Yeah.
But then I'm a conservative.
Good shape.
Behind.
Sorry.
No. I'm sorry, there's someone behind you. That's you.
Julian, thank you very much. Can Labor for Refugees make any, at this moment, creative use of the civics, which happened, as you will know, on the 18th of October 2001, right after the Tampa and the children overboard fiasco? Is there not some way that can be used at this point? The book by Marion Wilkinson and David Barr, The Dark Victory. Can't we bring that out of it and use it?
Yes, I guess you could. The problem. Sorry, the question is, couldn't Labor for Refugees use the Civex episode to help change the debate? 353 people drowned on the 18th and 19th of October 2001. It's a terrible, terrible event. And by the way, one thing which seems to have escaped the attention of Labor and the Coalition alike is that most of the people who drowned on the Civex were people who had men living in Australia on temporary protection visas. One of the vices of temporary protection visas is while it offers you protection for 3 years, subject to renewal, it denies family reunion. So the people who want their families to rejoin them have got no alternative but to let them use people smugglers. You know that the Coalition's concern about drownings was false when they said that they would reintroduce temporary protection visas.
Right.
And they have done.
Yeah.
And it just gives the lie to everything they say. I don't for a minute believe that they're sincere about their concern when people drown. For them, I think it's just a great selling opportunity in the Australian public. Who really, the other problem with using Civex now is that the argument is too subtle. It takes more than 7 seconds to communicate, and it will get lost in the barrage of pet food commercials that follow. It's a real difficulty. We're not good at protracted, subtle arguments in this country. Stephen.
If you have to do the elevator pitch, the 7-second pitch, as you say, we will all read the book, by the way, but you have to do the 7-second elevator pitch on turning around the boats to stop the drownings. What would that 7 seconds or 21 words or less be?
Boats are still leaving, people are still drowning. We shouldn't punish the survivors. Mind you, I just like the idea of a 7 seconds.
This is not a question about refugees per se, but it's about Shannon Suleiman. It seems to me that Abbott, with his sort of threats and sort of aggressive language, is really not assisting in any way. He's just getting himself popularity as a sort of strongman. I lived in Jakarta for a couple of years, and I know that unless the regime is given some kind of method of saving face, as well as releasing our guys, that it won't happen. A, I'd like to know if you agree with that, and B, is anybody working on a solution
some distance from all of that. My understanding is that Julie Bishop is working on something. It didn't come as an enormous surprise to see Abbott blundering in and whether your observation about the cultural settings in Jakarta are right or not, I don't know, but it sounds right. It sounds utterly plausible for that part of the globe. All you can say is that so far we've done a pretty bad job at trying to persuade them to a different course. Incidentally, for those of you who are interested and never have debates about capital punishment, I spent some time with Brian Stevenson when he was in Melbourne recently. He's the American death penalty lawyer who does extraordinary work in Alabama. And he has a terrific line which says, you don't rape a convicted rapist as punishment. You don't rob from a convicted burglar for punishment. You don't kill a convicted killer for punishment. Quite a good argument.
From a legal perspective, obviously we're contravening laws, and are there any specific, simple, are there any specific